There's an epidemic spreading. Scientists say it can change your brain. It can release dangerous chemicals like formaldehyde into your bloodstream. It can expose your lungs to acrolein, which can cause irreversible damage. It's not a parasite, not a virus, not an infection. It's vaping.
There's no doubt that we have all seen one of these advertisements on our social media apps, streaming services, and even on TV. And it is advertisements like these that really bring attention to the problem of youth drug use in our society. As youth, we have a lot of ties to this topic because it is our demographic, our people who are being affected by this issue. Because we care about the people of our generation and have stakes in it, we wanted to dig deeper into the problem and truly address it to make a better future for ourselves and generations to come. We did extensive research on teen drug abuse and made many discoveries. Every single one of us is either at risk or knows someone who has dealt with this problem. We as teens and young adults are all exposed to drug use, at parties, in school bathrooms, even in class. Everywhere we look, drugs are prevalent. Today, we will be hearing about what teen drug abuse is, the root of the problem, how Greater Lafayette is affected, how it is being addressed in media and government, and finally, new ways this problem can be solved in Indiana. We will start off by discussing what teen drug abuse is. So it can really be defined as any sort of use of an illicit substance, like alcohol and tobacco. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders explains how a major aspect of drug abuse is that it has negative effects on the users, like eventual dependence and a development of tolerance, where more of the drug is needed to have the same effects as before. To really understand this issue, you must first understand the drugs commonly used by people our age. According to a Medicine Net article by Dr. Roxanne Dryden Edwards, there are a variety of drugs abused by teens, which include alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, cold medicines, cocaine, hallucinogens like magic mushrooms, and non-prescribed opioids. I know I have personally seen about all of these substances being used by high schoolers at one time or another, so it didn't come as too much of a shock when I read about current youth drug use statistics. An article by the American Addiction Centers tells of a finding made by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. By 12th grade, 58.5% of teens had consumed alcohol and 47% had used some sort of illicit drug. Now that you have some general knowledge about teen drug abuse, you will be hearing from Amanda Martin about the root of this problem.
Thank you for the introduction. As Jenna said, I will be telling you the real reason why teens begin using drugs and how this problem has become such a major part of youth life. Obviously, there are a large variety of reasons why kids will begin using drugs, but the three I'm going to focus on today are to fit in, to gain experience, and to feel better. We've all heard the time-old phrase, just say no, as a way to escape peer pressure. And sometimes it really is that easy, but the problem is, most kids don't want to say no. Carrying around a vape or a pen and doing tricks has turned into an aesthetic that some teens want to obtain. In this instance, it comes down to the fact that they think this looks cool and that's how they want to appear. Furthermore, there are certain crowds of teens whose social life revolve around doing drugs, and a lot of the time, teens who don't participate just won't get invited. The next reason some kids begin using drugs is to gain experience. They view it as a rite of passage because it has become so common amongst teens and young adults. They're curious as to what the hype is all about and think, what's the harm in just trying it? But the reality is, many teens get more comfortable with the idea of drug use as they gain experience, and then they continue on to more harmful and addictive substances. People think, it won't happen to me, but addiction is one thing we can count on to never discriminate. The final reason I'm outlining today as to why teens begin using drugs is to feel better. As I'm sure you can imagine, in many teens' lives, they face obstacles they want an escape from. Drug use is an easy place to turn to. Many are fighting internal battles such as depression or anxiety and are basically turning to self-medicating. They use drugs to suppress their negative feelings and replace them with a temporary high. The real problem begins when they indulge in this temporary high. So often, it turns into addiction. With a high population of teens and young adults, the greater Lafayette community is of course not immune to this problem. Two prominent ways the Lafayette area is affected is by a large number of overdoses and by the heroin epidemic. The Tippecanoe County Health Department is worried about the drug abuse going on in the county. As of this October, overdoses in the county are up by 31%, according to the Tippecanoe Emergency Ambulance Service. Many of these overdoses are from heroin. Purdue and the surrounding area is right in the middle of the heroin highway. This has to do with the drug flow between Chicago and Indianapolis via Interstate 65. According to the Purdue Exponent, heroin has become 20% of Tippecanoe County's drug prosecutions. Overdoses and the heroin epidemic are two dangerous plights affecting the greater Lafayette community that must be addressed. While these effects are localized to Lafayette, the teen drug use problem is obviously very extensive and prominent throughout the country. We will now be going back to Jenna to hear how this problem is being addressed in the media throughout the United States.
As Amanda just said, I will be explaining how the media has addressed the issue of teen drug abuse. The video campaign you saw at the start of this presentation is a major way that the media is being used to reach the teen audience and encourage an end of drug use, specifically in terms of vaping. Two prominent campaigns that can be seen all over the internet are the Real Cost and the Truth campaign. The Real Cost was a campaign launched by the FDA, and its goal, according to an FDA Real Cost article, is to target and spread their message to the 10.7 million youth aged 12 to 17 who tried or are open to trying e-cigarettes. The Truth campaign spreads similar messages as the Real Cost and has proven to be successful. According to the truthinitiative.org, Truth has helped to reduce the youth smoking rate from 23% in 2000 to just 3.7% as of current. These campaigns are successful in reaching the youth audience because they rely on youth culture to get their messages across. They promote all over the internet, a forum basically run by the youth generation. And they use imagery like sci-fi, as you saw in the starting video, and rhetoric like ditching Juul is cool to really connect with their audience. Another way drug issues are addressed in the media is through TV shows. A show that brought huge recognition to the issue of teen drug abuse was Euphoria. The show's portrayal of drug addiction was very raw, and it was able to draw in a large youth audience, and those youth unknowingly became more exposed to the message about issues of drug use. The media is just one way that teen drug abuse is talked about and worked on. Ethan DeNovo will now be diving further in to explain the governmental laws and policies that cover the issue.
Thank you very much for the introduction. There are many recent laws and policies that have been enacted recently to help slow the problem down. State Bill 226 has fixed many aspects when it comes to opioid medication in Indiana. On July 21st, 2017, a Hall Render article detailed that this government bill was passed in response to the opioid crisis in America. This bill made it so prescribers of opioid medications cannot supply more than 7 days' worth of the medication at any given time. However, this rule only applies to all people under the age of 18 and adults who are receiving the prescription from a new provider. A later addendum to this bill states that all patients can request to receive a lesser dose of an opiate prescription with the approval of a doctor and/or guardian. If the prescription is successfully lessened, the prescriber must document the exemption in the patient's medical records. If the exemption ends up having negative side effects, the prescription can always be returned to the normal amount within 30 days of the exemption. Now, as you might have guessed from the anti-vape ads we showed at the beginning of this presentation, the most common problem we see in teens today are various forms of smoking. Nowadays, e-cigarettes have mostly phased out standard cigarettes in terms of popularity, but they haven't always been a problem. E-cigarettes were originally made to help people wean nicotine addicts off tobacco. However, teens started using them for the various flavors they provide, which help create the problem we have today. In response to the rise of teen vaping, Indiana has imposed some regulations on the sale and manufacturing of e-cigarettes. The Public Health Law Center lists some of these governmental regulations, such as the banning of sales of e-cigarettes to anyone under 21, mandating the use of licenses in order to manufacture them, setting the maximum legal amount of nicotine that can be in e-cigarettes to 75 milligrams per milliliter, and removing traces of vitamin E acetate from any e-cigarette. Unfortunately, despite all these rules and regulations that Indiana has set, the teen drug issue is still at large. This is due to the fact that these laws aren't perfect, and therefore people have found ways around them. With the issues of opioid prescriptions, people can exaggerate their symptoms and/or need in order to get more of the opiates. While lessening the prescription would give a patient a chance to avoid addiction, providers can overrule a patient's prescription request. This could potentially be fatal if the provider was wrong and cannot be changed. Here are some of the changes that I would personally make to State Bill 226. If an opiate prescription was successfully lessened, prescribers should have the patient complete a survey during regularly scheduled appointments. This will track their progress with the new dosage and gauge whether changes need to be made. The survey should not be given remotely, as the patient has greater opportunity to either lie or not respond. If a provider overrules a request for a lesser opiate dosage, it should not be absolute until a discussion takes place. This will allow the patient and provider to come to a better understanding as to what would as opposed to a higher power rejecting something just because they see it as unnecessary. The surprising lack of punishment for unlicensed e-cigarette manufacturing leads to an increased amount of deaths associated with unsafe e-cigarettes. USA Today article describes the main culprit of many of these deaths is caused by vitamin E acetate, which is used as a thickening agent that also extends the duration of THC, which is a hallucinogenic agent found in marijuana. The combination of THC and vitamin E acetate is what gave e-cigarettes the reputation that they have now and the popularity that they have around teens. When I transition to this slide, your eyes probably gravitated towards the large image of gummy bears before anything else. This is because gummy bears are one of the many victims of THC lacing in today's world. A news report from ABC tells the story of 11 teens from LaPorte County, Indiana, being hospitalized after eating THC-laced gummy bears. These kind of stories are popping up all across America and display the true danger of letting drugs invade our normal foods. Punishment for lacing in either scenario should be greater than they are now. Even though we can make changes to our laws regarding this issue, we can make changes in our own lives as well. Jackie Juarez has more details on how you can make a difference in daily life.
One of the solutions I found for the teen drug crisis is starting from education. So, a national survey indicated that some children start using drugs by age 12 or 13, and prevention is the best strategy. Starting through education means, educating children in school and even at home. So educating parents, guardians is also one way that this problem can be addressed. So this means implementing research-based programs in schools and at home and individual settings. This research-based program would be divided into 3 programs. And the first one would be universal, which addresses risk and protective factors common to all children in given settings. The next one would be selective, programs that are already for groups of children and teens who have specific factors that put them at an increased risk for drug use. And the last one would be indicated, which is already a program designed for youth to have already started using drugs. This program comes from the National Institute of Drug Abuse that they already have developed through scientific research. But in Indiana, this is not quite something that has really taken off for the youth. So this would be one way that Indiana could start preventing more drug abuse. Another solution that Indiana could implement is decriminalizing certain drugs. According to the Drug Policy Alliance, This would create a climate in which people who are using drugs problematically have an incentive to seek treatment, so steering addiction away from prison and prioritizing health and safety over punishment for people who use drugs. In 2019, Americans were surveyed if they would prefer to go to jail if they had an addiction and were caught in possession, or receive the help they needed to overcome their addiction. There is also research that shows that incarceration has no effects on drug abuse. According to the Pew Charitable Trust Organization, their research shows higher rates of drug imprisonment did not translate into lower rates of drug use, arrest, or overdose deaths. It actually did the opposite. The higher the drug imprisonment, the higher drug use, arrests, and overdose deaths in those states. Meaning that incarceration is adding more to the problem than solving the problem.
Thank you, Jackie. Throughout this presentation, my group and I have discussed what teen drug abuse is, how it started, how it affects the greater Lafayette area, how the media and government is handling the problem, and what can be made to help Indiana. While the mass media and government is doing their part to solve this problem, you can end the cycle too. Writing to your local government, creating a petition, these are some of the many things you can do to make a change in this epidemic. Now that you know the real cost, speak out and we can end this together. Thank you all for listening.